This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by the National Campaign Against Drunk Driving, GoDaddy, and Netflix.
1, 2, 3.
It's too many.
Yeah, I've been doing the math. 2 of you are going to have to go.
2 of us? Well, you 2. Hey, welcome to iFanboy, the comic book discussion show. I am Ron. I'm here with
Connor.
And I'm Josh. We are here to talk about Y the Last Man. Why?
Finally.
Finally. For those of you who've been reading it in trades, you finally got a chance to read it. For those of us who've been reading it every issue since the first one, that was awesome.
And this is probably one of our most requested series to talk about, to cover. And we got a little selfish in that Connor and I were reading it in trades, and we didn't want to talk about it until it was all finished. And so the trade came out a couple months ago, I think, and we finally read it and absorbed it. And
yeah, I mean, this book went 60 issues. And near the end, they actually spread them out. They were coming out bi-monthly, which sucked. And so, like, the last year, we only got sort of a bunch of them, but at the same time, they did a good job. We're going to talk about the whole series and what we like about it. And stop looking at me like that because you throw me off. Because you're like, what are you doing? Is you're waiting for me to screw up
well, no,
so that you can make fun of me.
Let's give the general Why Last Man.
We're going to talk about the whole series, and then at the end of this, we're going to talk about the end of the book. At that point, we're going to tell you, if you haven't read the end of the book, don't watch. I mean, I don't want you to not watch. I want you to keep watching, but we don't want to ruin it for you. So we'll warn you before that happens. So we'll be more general about what's awesome about it.
This series was one of those ones I was known for getting to the end, and there was a lot of. I mean, we spent weeks going, "Don't tell us, don't tell us."
Yeah,
right.
So,
okay. So what is Y the Last Man? You might ask. In 2000, I believe. I should probably check my facts before we start. It's like I know, but as soon as I say it here, then I doubt. Brian K. Vaughan, a relative unknown at the time, he had done.
01.
He had done Swamp Thing. Was it 01? Yeah.
copyright in the trade is 02. It says in the summer of 2002. So
No, that's when it happened.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Right. Anyway, Brian K. Vaughan, we should just start over. No. Brian K. Vaughan, who really had only done, I think, a couple of things for Marvel and Swamp Thing. He'd done a Swamp Thing series about a female Swamp Thing that tanked horribly. And this came out of nowhere. This was my pick of the week the first time it came out, because from the very first step of the first issue, I was like, oh, this is something really special. So what you've got is York Brown, a 22-year-old student, or not student, he'd just gotten out of school, magician, escape artist kind of kid, kind of a nerdy pop culture, obsessed kind of kid. He's about to propose to his girlfriend, he's in love with her, and then all the men on Earth die.
Not just men, all the male mammals.
Everything male.
Population, complete, except for him and his monkey.
All of a sudden, they all start hemorrhaging blood, and every male on the planet but York and his monkey Ampersand is dead.
So right away, what you have is a really great science fiction idea. But then, as you get going, you start thinking about the cultural ramifications of what that actually would be like. Mm-hmm. And that is where, for me, the book really grabs onto you and really has a lot to say. And what's funny is that the more that I read it and the more that I think about it, there are so many stories that could have been done, because gender issues for society, are huge.
Right. Well, and before we get to the story elements, it's probably important to note, like you mentioned, ran 60 issues. Pia Guerra was the main artist for the vast majority of them, right?
Goran Sudzaka came in for other parts of it. You almost couldn't tell the difference. Right.
And it came out at a time when Vertigo had a lot of energy behind it in the early 2000s. Sandman had wrapped up or was wrapping up, and
Sandman was over by then.
Preacher was over by then. And this kind of has emerged in the past couple of years as the leading kind of Vertigo book.
Yeah.
And we posed the question a few episodes back.
Long time
ago.
60 or so back.
Yeah. What was the next big Vertigo book after Y ends and all that kind of stuff. So Y has meant a lot to Vertigo's line.
Y to me is one of those really breakout comic books, I think, since Preacher. I mean, people read this book who don't read comics. They know about it.
You can give this. I give it to friends and family who don't read comics at all.
And they can't put it down. Like, you start reading it and you want the next one, It's totally comic book crap in that regard.
And from the moment the first issue hit, they've talked about the movie.
Yeah.
That's been in pre-production for years. I think he took a crack at the script.
Yep.
But who knows when we'll ever see that. It was an HBO series or whatever. But this is that big, rambling story that has an end. It goes for the 60 issues, which is 5 years, theoretically. and it's just, there's all sorts of stuff in there, and it's the journey of these characters over a long period of time, so you get to see them develop and things happen, and their hair gets longer.
They get older.
York goes bald.
Yeah. well, you summed up kind of the premise is that all the men of the world died except for York, and
the gender side.
What I thought was really interesting was like you said, the effect it had on society. Is that and this is by no means I'm pro women. I'm not saying.
Wow, you have to couch this before you start.
Yeah, well, no, say,
I'll be over here.
But what happens is that society basically falls apart. Power plants stop working. All technology, the government falls apart. I mean, basically, it's mass chaos. Because if you look at it, well, not saying men run everything, but they're half or more of the population. So
we own all the stuff.
Yeah. So like the Secretary of Agriculture or Education, that's Battlestar. Yeah. Some like 37th in line woman becomes president of the United States, and literally then what happens is that it becomes chaos in the streets, and some women don't know what to do and kind of go hungry and starve because they can't fend for themselves, while other women kind of mobilize and these little militias and the Amazon.
Well, what you see is society fractures, and there's certain people who want to put, get stuff together, and the government holds it together. York's mom is a congresswoman, so she, she's trying to keep things together, and then, large portions of America become martial law wastelands, basically, where you have the Amazons, who are a group of women who've decided that this is the best thing that could have ever happened. Male dominance was holding everybody down, so they all cut off a boob. And they get really angry. And anybody who isn't with them is against them. The
whole plot of the story is now you've got the one guy left, and now it's A, he has to survive. B, he can't be found out because he's the only man left.
Because if you think about that, what happens in the books is a giant political power struggle about who can control the last man, because he's
the most
valuable
resource.
Yeah, he's the key.
He's the only. You think it's. Yeah. The ramifications, the more, once you start thinking about it, he's the only way that the species can continue.
Right.
I don't know what the rest of the cows did, but they cloned them at the end.
But and then at the same time, so you've got the political ramifications running, but at the same time, his girlfriend, who he wants to propose to, is in Australia, and he just wants to get to her.
So he's trying to get to his girlfriend. He meets up with people. It's basically a long road trip.
Yes,
exactly. The whole book is one long road trip because he's constantly moving rather than be caught. He
starts in New York,
right?
Ends in Paris.
The book ends in Paris. Yeah,
but they're all over the place.
But he bounces around the globe. He ends up with a bodyguard protector.
Agent 355.
A secret agent of the Culper Ring, which is a kind of very black ops kind of arm of the government that goes back to Thomas Jefferson or something like that.
Yeah, and then along the way they meet up with, they make more friends. He's got a doctor. I mean, by the time you get to the end, he's got a whole little group.
Yeah.
And there's a big cast of characters. You've been with them for a long time, so you sort of know them all. It's surprising by the end how well you know these characters.
And how attached you get to them, too.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, big time. And then,
there's the monkey.
Ampersand is monkey, and so throughout the whole storyline, you've got not only you got York trying to get to his girlfriend, but then you've got the mystery of why did all the men die, and so the doctor who they meet up with is a geneticist who thinks she has a key to it, but her lab gets trashed, and my notes are in a lab in San Francisco, so let's go to San Francisco, and the travel, as they travel across the country, and they meet up with various different people, packs of women that are setting up their own cultures. Like one town, I think it was in Ohio, that they got the power plant back working, and it was just like normal life. It's just there were no men, and some women are very happy with it. Many turn to lesbianism because they want love and stuff like that. Not that that's wrong, you do what you have to. Just
don't talk.
Well, no, I thought it was interesting. But then, and then along the way, you have little deviations. Like in the Midwest, a Russian astronauts crash, and there's actually a man amongst them. And so I thought that was interesting, because there are people up in space.
He kept finding different ways. One of the things that, when you talk about it, there's the big story, and there's the little story.
Yep.
I mean, it's man trying to find his love.
Right.
Which is really great, but then on top, this is like the brilliance of Brian K. Vaughan.
Right.
That's going on the whole time, and just he kept throwing things in. He was really good at thinking of stuff like, well, what if there was an astronaut in space? They would have lived.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would have.
So
he comes back and
you get these little diversions, like York facing his fear by hanging out with that weird S&M issue.
That was a weird.
Yeah, that got weird quick.
Yeah, that happened a lot. This is the thing about Brian Vaughan. When you read his work and you read these issues, you see a guy who's really got a mastery of the form.
Yeah.
This is everybody talks about they should make this into a movie or whatever. But again, this is another book that uses the form of the comic book. Every page in this is like sort of a little artwork unto itself. He was really good at pacing the pages as you read through them, that there's sort of a punchline at the end of each page, and then to take that further, at the end of each issue, This was
Cliffhanger.
every issue had a cliffhanger at the end. That made this a really, really fun book to read in issues because...
Which is, you read it in issues,
yes,
right? Which
I
is
did.
normally the reverse, because normally you're reading trades.
This was one of the best sort of sequential sort of types of stories. I mean, I'm sure it reads fine in trades, and it's fun because then you can go more, because the fact is you'd finish an issue and you would want more.
Yep.
And he had the plan for what was going to happen, so he knew the whole time how it was going to end and how stuff was going to go, and it creates a really nice arc. And I really, when you read the whole thing and you get to the end and you see how the characters end up, it's a very smooth transition through the whole thing. You don't even realize it's happening, just like if it was your own life.
It's important to keep in mind too that this is a very adult book.
That's a good point.
In that, not just that the fact that the themes are very, very mature and very sophisticated, the societal themes, the gender issues. Lots of nudity, lots of language. I mean, this is very adult entertainment, not in a porno way, but in everything about this is high-minded.
Yep.
You know, there's nothing simple in this book. There's no simple answers. Everyone has different motivations. The people who are bad aren't necessarily bad because they're bad. They just have different wants than the people who are
well, if you
good.
like one of the sort of groups of villains, I guess, is there's the Israeli army, there's Alter.
Yep.
And one of the really smart things that he thought of is like, well, if all the men died, who would be the best army in the world? Well, the Israeli army would be the most powerful because their men and women are equal. They're both trained in combat. They're alternate states. So, they're probably the only left standing army, who are trained to fight. So,
or at least the most popular. I mean, there's women in most armies, but the Israeli army's got the most women in it.
Because everybody has to join the army. And then one of the other things to bring up is if there's a complaint that some people have had about this book that they didn't like Yorick.
Yeah. I didn't like Yorick.
You didn't like Yorick?
No, I didn't.
You never came around to it?
No.
He's kind of a nerd. He's a pop culture nerd. He's constantly quoting things. He's a little awkward. He's always ruining moments.
He's creating this whole, kind of idea of this guy he's into Houdini and escape arts and all that kind of stuff. But then
he's also always quoting nerd movies and stuff.
Right, yeah, and the thing is if you think about it, put yourself in the position of you're the lone male after the gender apocalypse, he kept it together surprisingly well.
Well, I mean, at first he's very low. He's very not taking it very seriously.
Right.
One of the things that was interesting as I was reading through the end of this again is that right away, and Vaughan does this through the whole thing if you watch for it, he reverses the gender roles. Because Yorick is the weaker of him and 355, who are the main sort of...
And also between him and his sister, too.
Yeah.
His sister becomes one of the Amazons, but then becomes...
And so the whole time, like, Yorick is playing the traditional part of the damsel in distress through the whole thing.
He's always being saved. He's always in trouble.
Yeah, he's going and doing the stupid thing.
Luckily, he was kind of an effemoved guy.
Yeah, no. They always have to say
if it was me,
they disguised them a lot by putting. Sometimes they walked around with a gas because a lot of women started wearing gas masks because they thought there was something wrong with the air because they just didn't know. So that was an easy cover. That was a nice device they used. I don't think he ever actually fully dressed up like a woman. But
he walked around in plain
with like a
sight
burqa.
because a lot of women, were dressing up like men.
Right. Yeah.
Well, if you think about in comic books what the idea traditionally, of what a man is, and this is why the last man. And so you think of big manly, Clark Kent or Captain America or just big dudes and Yorick was not that. Yorick was more like dudes that I know.
He's almost the Peter Parker pre
powers.
And I think that the story would have gone completely differently had he been a firefighter.
Right.
With a beard.
He wouldn't have survived. I think he would have been found and killed right away. I mean, the reason that Yorick can't survive is he's sort of girly-ish.
Yeah.
So you didn't like Yorick?
I thought he was very irritating. Like I didn't dislike him. I just thought like everything that you described I just found irritating. Like if I had known him in real life, I would have found him irritating.
I think he was irritating, but I mean all the characters.
I'm not saying he shouldn't. He wasn't supposed to be irritating.
And all the characters reacted to him like that.
Yeah.
I mean, people were like, "Stop talking."
By the time I got to the very end, I thought, this is amazing. I love this book so much, and I really don't like the main character. But
that is interesting.
I like all the characters around him a lot. Like 355 is probably the best character, but. But then it's just like, enough.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the end. And at this point...
well, before we get to the end, we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the end.
In 2006, 13,470 people were killed in alcohol-impaired driving crashes. These fatalities accounted for 32% of the total motor vehicle traffic fatalities in the United States. If you're planning to drink alcohol with friends, designate a sober driver before going out and give that person your keys.
There's no way to hide it. If you drive drunk, we will find you. Cops everywhere are stepping up enforcement and cracking down like never before.
Sir, have you been drinking tonight? You've been drinking tonight.
Make no mistake, you will get caught and you will be arrested.
Thanks to Netflix for sponsoring this episode of iFanboy. With Netflix, you can rent over 90,000 titles online, including lots of Blu-ray titles with free shipping both ways. They now have over 40 shipping centers, so almost all deliveries happen in just one business day. The Netflix plans start from $4.99, and as a new member, you get a free, no-risk 2-week trial membership. Check it out at www.netflix.com/iFanboy, and don't forget that www. And we have to thank GoDaddy.com. Web hosting from GoDaddy.com includes 99% uptime, 24/7 support, and free access to Hosting Connection, the place to install over 30 free applications sure to help you get the most from your hosting plan and websites. If you want to make an impact online, GoDaddy.com has what you need. .com names as low as $1.99, plus world-class hosting, fast and easy website builders, and much, much more. GoDaddy.com, get your piece of the internet.
Let's talk about the end.
Everybody,
Again,
if you haven't read, if you're in the middle of reading it, or if you want to read it, you might want to pause, or just, we can't be held responsible.
Okay.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
My first thought about this book is that on the surface, you would think that the point of this is what killed the men.
Right.
That is not important in this book.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's not the point of the book.
Yeah, but that's like all science fiction.
Right.
In that-
That's how you know it's good science
Fiction, when it's good, is about society now.
And the people.
And the world, and not about the thing. And the
Right.
thing in this is the men died. That's like Kirkman's Walking Dead. The thing isn't the zombies or why there are zombies. It's the people.
It's what happens.
This is the people.
Right.
This is a story about the people and the world. What would happen in the world if all the men died? It's not important. And so much, in fact, that in the final book, this is the whys and wherefores, the last trade. So this is right towards the end of the book.
Issue 50.
Yeah, whatever. It's fine.
York is finally reunited with his girlfriend.
Beth.
They meet up in Paris, Beth. Actually, just before you get into that little footnote, is they're finally reunited, and turns out right when it happened 5 years ago, they were on the phone when all the men died, and she was about to dump him.
Yeah.
But that never happened, and so he spent the past 7 years finding her dad.
I found that very familiar. Like,
oh, totally. Yeah,
that hit way too close to home.
yeah, that was really kind of eerie almost.
But in terms of the not worrying about what happened, Beth and York are talking. York says, as far as answers go, it was vaguely unsatisfying. And Beth says, after everything we've been through, is there any other explanation that would have been satisfactory? That's sort of almost talking to us, saying,
I think so.
No one would have been satisfied with his answer.
Yep.
York says, aliens? I would have accepted anything with witchcraft or involving nanobots. Like, that's almost talking directly.
The nanobots is talking to a mainstream comic book audience.
This is almost directed rightly at us, saying, don't worry about why the men died. That's not what this is about. And I thought that was a really good choice on his part.
And I agree with that, because that is not what it's about.
And there would have been no satisfactory answer.
You know what?
Every answer would have been, somebody would have been, oh, that's stupid.
And then you realize what it was a character piece.
Right.
Because at the end, what they do, so they finish everything up, and he finds out that he was chasing Beth the whole time, but really what he was happening the whole time was he was finding out that 355 was his soulmate and he was in love with her.
Yeah.
And then Brian K. Vaughan rips my guts out.
I gotta say, well, first off, that reveal. So he finally meets up with Beth, and they have a wonderful night together. Blah blah. Then they have this big argument, spinning out.
How true is that?
That was awesome.
It was totally accurate.
The person you think you meant for is often not that person.
And because you've been building them up in your mind for 5 years, and all of a sudden, like, anything bad about them is gone.
Right.
And everything great about them is...
And so the realization that he was in love with 355, I thought was good and believable, but like I don't think she was his soulmate, because like I think the only reason they were stuck together for 5 years, so of course they gravitated. So the idea of her leaving him, of course he's like, wait, maybe I should be with her. So it was very real in that kind of that kind of idea. But I don't know if they were meant to be each other or whatever. But then he completely rips our heart out when 355 dies, and just is. I found myself. I was completely choked up. I was just.
It was awful. I mean, like.
Yeah.
Oh, it was awful.
Yeah, it was
I mean,
awful.
I don't even want to describe it. I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
I think their
Well, that's
relationship
what-
became.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Well,
a
that's
real
what happens as a
relationship.
relationship grows. Yeah, no, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
but
I'm not saying it's not a valid relationship. I just don't think that she was actually his soulmate all along.
What do you have to base that on?
Well, because I don't believe in soulmates and stuff like that. So
Well, then
that's
what the hell does that do with anything?
What happens
I have a cold heart.
is that York and Beth have their night together, and there's a lot of passion, and they find that they have an argument, and York realizes he's not in love with Beth anymore. They've changed too much.
Yep.
And realizes he's in love with 355. He goes to her, admits he's in love with her. She admits that she's in love with him. Boom, she's shot in the head by the Israelis.
like the moment.
Like they didn't give you any time to be happy about it.
And then York kicks some ass. They shoot 355 and then they gas the hotel where they're in. That one full page when the gas clears. Yeah, and he's got the gas mask and 355's nightstick.
Yeah.
Because part of the whole York's growth is through the whole series was that he was a wuss and no good in a fight.
Yep.
Right.
They got into lots of fights. There was lots of violence, lots of guns, lots of knives, lots of arrows, things like that. And York was always just like, and throughout the whole thing, 355 was trying to train him, and they would spar. car and things like that. And this was the culmination of his, all right, now, you just effed with me and now I'm going to F you up. You know what I mean? Like that. And that was...
It's a very equal fight.
It was a very equal fight.
As much as she does.
He holds his own.
Then she takes his stick away.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, but he ends up with the gun. So he holds his own. That's a great point. He's finally able to assert himself as a person.
Right.
And then the very end of the book is we jump 60 years.
The last issue.
The last issue. I'm curious what you guys thought of the last issue.
Oh my God, it killed me. And I reread it. I read it whenever it came out a few months ago, and I just reread it now. And this morning I was catching up, and I read it, and I was eating breakfast, and I was eating a waffle, and it killed me.
Yeah.
The monkey dies.
The monkey dying was awful. So,
oh my God! And the monkey he gives the monkey the poison grape.
Yeah. All right. It's okay.
We jump 60 years in the future. We see who everyone is. Yorick is an old man.
I love that.
We started in the future. We flash back then to see what's happened to everyone. It's very much 6 feet under.
It was the 6 feet under ending.
Yeah. What they did was they introduced us to the fact that society is blooming, technology. We've got flying airships and things like that.
They started cloning.
And they brought the men back by cloning Yorick, and so we're introduced to like the 13th clone or 17th clone of him, which looks just like him, acts just like him. And then through that, then we start going back and we see Yorick. He's got fully bald. He's
that was a
traveling,
really nice. That was a callback to a couple issues right when he was at 355. He goes, "You notice my hair is thinning?"
Yeah.
And it's another one of those things that Vaughan did really well because he's saying, this is the kind of thing that people would actually be thinking about. Like, you're the last dude and you're worried about losing your hair. Who cares? Right. But he does.
Yeah, and so people, so you see that in the future, like the president of the world or whatever is directly related to one of the characters that was in Yorick's kind of crew, and then we go back.
The other baby boy is the Tsar of Russia now.
Yeah, exactly, because he was the child. One of the Russian astronauts was pregnant, and so they had a baby boy. We see that they go further back. We see that his sister has settled down with Beth, which I thought was an interesting irony.
Beautiful.
And then finally, it just culminated, and then we see the death of the monkey, which was just a gut wrencher.
And then finally, the last panel is that Yorick was using the clone the whole time to find a way to escape.
Yeah,
well,
that's the whole thing.
They locked Yorick up in a sanitarium
because they're afraid he's going to kill himself.
Yeah, and
because he's gotten old and demented.
His clone visits him. The whole issue is them talking and flashing back in the talk, and Yorick's crazy old man here.
Yeah,
I love old Yorick.
And the very last page is he jumps to freedom.
Yep.
Which I thought he killed himself.
No, I knew he jumped.
No, I mean before you turn the page, you realize that. I thought,
when you read back through it, you realize that he's setting him up the whole time, and you watch the panels like he's like working the things, and he's sort of hinting at what's going to happen because he's been an escape artist. That's the one thing he's been competent at the whole time.
Exactly.
And so from a storytelling standpoint, how nice is that?
To bring it back to the escape
back to the beginning.
Because the first issue starts with him in the straitjacket.
Yep.
Doing the escape artistry stuff.
And then the last thing is the straitjacket free, which means that he's freed himself of
the burden of everything that's happened.
Seriously, when the monkey dies, though, oh my God,
it's awful. I don't want to talk about it.
It was an annoying monkey.
This is one of the examples of what Vertigo does so well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they give a creator the space to tell this long story, 5 years of character development and just becoming attached to these people. And you don't have this happening almost in any other company. In that you get here, you want us to tell you got a big story to tell. Here's 5 years, do it. Tell it right.
It also helps that it took.
No, but
he didn't blow it.
Yeah, he didn't blow it.
Right. I'm not saying everyone.
I wonder if this started in today's market. Similar to what we're talking about with Scalped by Jason Aaron and Arm Guerra, whether or not, there's always a lot of worry about Vertigo books making it. And this is the goal, is to make it. You got to get past 4 trades worth of books and have people, because the thing is, we've talked to a lot of retailers. Preacher, Why the Last Man are great for retailers because their comic book crack, because they sell the first book to them, and more times than not, that person is back in a week for the next one.
Yeah.
And then they come back and buy the next 4. And so it's kind of like with TV, where if you get 100 episodes under your belt and you go to syndication, you've made it.
Yeah.
For a Vertigo creative team, the goal is to get to 4 or 5 trades and actually have it take and have people feel that crack addiction.
Well, and this is the best book of that. I think that anytime this comes out, this is a universally good book.
Yes.
I mean, it's as a concept, it's so easy to explain.
Yep.
But then the more you dig, the more layers you find. It is endlessly. I could still think of all these things he could have done.
And what you said earlier was basically the story is following Yorick and his team, parallel to other people that are also involved with him. But there's a whole world that could be explored.
Oh, totally.
What's happening? How did they get the government back up?
Right.
What's happening over here?
They never will.
There's a really
right, no, but I mean that's the thing. It's such a rich world he created.
And there's a scene in the middle of it, all these people are like, well, what happened to all the male musicians? It's it's not just Kurt Cobain who died; it's everyone.
Yeah.
And just those things, you start thinking about how our world is set up. It's a thinky, makes you think a lot.
Yeah.
I said thinky.
I find it interesting too that Brian K. Vaughan, who is one of the we interviewed interviewed him in our first episode, second episode.
Second episode.
That this wraps up the same year that he's pretty much left comics, and he's escaped his world as he moves on to Lost and movies.
Is the straight jacket a dollar sign?
Yeah, it might be.
Ex Machina is still going.
It's still going.
Ex Machina is still going. Anyways,
We would be really remiss if we didn't talk more about Pia Guerra's art.
Yes, agreed.
oh God, yeah.
Who
Totally
is much a collaborator in this as Brian K. Vaughan is, and is responsible. I found myself marveling at the last trade. Just every person is.
She
As a
brought it.
character.
at
She's
the
a
end.
very simple approach, and which honestly, like, you know, I think about, look, when I think of a Vertigo book, it used to be kind of the Steve Dillon, because that's what I thought of Preach stuff. Like, now it's The Art and Why the Last Man. It's just, you know.
There's a line though, because what it is, I think those art styles are very connected. Because what it is it's the simplicity that belies what it's doing. Like,
There's no line wasted in this.
Yes.
right,
yeah,
and
yeah.
she's not letting. It's very
great
people-oriented. The faces, it's all conveyed because it's a character piece more than anything.
And all her women are hot without being like floozy.
Yeah,
No, they're realistic, and it's great. It's just awesome.
it's very clean, crisp art.
The story goes across the United States into Japan, into
goes everywhere.
into Europe, and never does it not feel natural, not feel right. I mean, it's really more. I mean, it's one of the, and this is honestly one of the rare, how many 10 trade paperbacks of a story that we all agree yes, and which is which is rare. So
This is also one of those stories where I would buy this in multiple forms.
Oh yeah,
Like,
when they absolute this,
if
omnibus.
they're gonna hardcover and stuff. This is a book worthy of having nice.
It's actually getting the omnibus hardcover, like Starman. It's getting that treatment, that hardcover treatment. So that's definitely that's a library one.
Yeah.
So.
We could go on about this for a really long time because there's so much there. I hope that this sort of gives you an idea about what it's about, what we thought about it. It's hard to do these shows where you're like, this is so good.
Right.
Here's all these things that are good about it. But
I thought there'd be more doing it.
Maybe
there was quite a lot of doing
With
it.
The Last Man.
Yeah. Well,
It was like
there was some sex.
Well, the thing is, immediately you think it's a male power fantasy. It's not. It's the opposite of that, which is
a terrifying nightmare
It's exactly what it would actually be.
for a man. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can think of a terrifying nightmare, you can write it to us at contact@ifanboy.com.
Or if you want to give us a call and tell us what you thought of Why the Last Man, call us on our voicemail line at 1-888-FANBOYS. That's 1-888-326-2697.
And you go to ifanboy.com. There'll be a thread on this show on Why the Last Man. You can tell us how you thought about that. You can check out our weekly audio show. We talk about the new books of the week. And at revision3.com/ifanboy. There will also be on the forums. You can go there, discuss the show, watch all of our weekly minis and all that stuff. And now we're looking at nudity.
You turn the nude page to me and you're like, look at this.
Well, no, I gotta say, the whole scene with his girlfriend when
That's
they reunited, that
athletic.
argument, it happened right after they did it, and they're naked throughout the entire argument, which I thought was really realistic and
Raw.
really, really raw, and I just thought it was good. So
He didn't pull punches in this. He did things that you're like, oh, wow, you decided to keep them naked for that.
read this.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no reason not to. I was first.
Doesn't like good things.
I was first.
No, I read the first issue when you bought it. I just said I'm gonna get this in trade.
All right, fine.
I read it on your couch actually.
Be that way.
Really?
Yeah, in California.
I love you.
Well, this is what happened if all the women died.
That would suck.
In ancient feudal Japan, the emperor once needed to record his friend shotgunning a beer for a decent price. He asked his most loyal samurai for counsel and a camera. They gave him the flip video camera. With it, he was able to record all of his bros and lady friends at the ragers he would throw. It was easy. All he had to do was press the record button. The modern Japanese flag is actually modeled after the glowing red orb. Once the footage was captured, he could easily transfer it to his MacBook with its powerful flip capabilities, then upload it to EmperorTube, YouTube's predecessor. That original flip video camera was lost with Tom Cruise in the Sino-Japanese War of 1898. Thankfully, history has preserved this relic in several different models that can be found in most major electronic stores. And although he never had any trouble getting the ladies, the flip made it even easier for the Emperor when he returned to Cal State Long Beach each fall. And that was my Revision 3 Back to School Intern Survival Guide, brought to you by Jawbone. Something cool that I like to do with my Jawbone is I like to sync it to my MacBook so I can Skype home and ask my parents for money. I'm Kelly Sutton.